Ever found yourself signing series of fixed term contracts, employment contracts, one after the other, year after year? What might seem like a simple arrangement can have significant and often overlooked implications for both employees and employers in Nigeria. Well, I'm here to shed more light on a common but complex aspect of Nigerian employment law, which is the reported use or repeated use, of fixed term contracts. Simply put, fixed term contracts are those specific contracts that have a predetermined duration. That is, a clear start date and end date, or one that is tied to a completion of a particular project. Unlike indefinite contracts, where such contracts are basically ended by maybe an actual termination notice or termination. But what then happens where a fixed term contract is not so fixed after all? Let me explain what I mean. So an employer gives you a fixed term contract, which is obviously with a start date and end date, normally annually, but then it decides and says it keeps renewing. It renews year one, year two, year three, year four. Now, obviously, this is where things might get a bit interesting and also potentially the immediate implication of this is that there's a lack of job security. There's that period of uncertainty because obviously, well, I've had clients where they've been in such situations, and what has happened year on year is that they are quite uncertain whether they are going to be sacked or not sacked, especially when they know that there's not going to be any notice period and stuff like that. So you have those sort of situations that happen. Obviously, even from an employer's perspective, there's no need for career progression. There's no need for financial emoluments beyond salary, loan accessibility, even that sense of belonging is kind of elusive. But beyond the practical, um, what it breeds is also that aspect of legitimate expectation, where you have that repeated fixed term contract. At some point, the employee begins to have legitimate expectation that his contract is one of permanence. It's almost a permanent. In Nigeria, generally, we don't have a rigid rule regarding repeated fixed term contracts becoming or transforming into permanent contracts. But one thing the NIC court, which is the NIC, the Specialist Labour Court for Employment Matters and Labour Matters, in such situations might examine substances of the employment relationship. If the employee has been performing continuously core duties over successive FTCs, that's fixed term contracts, the court might infer that aspect, that expectation of continuous employment. Employees might use, we understand a circumstance where employees might want to use fixed term contracts for flexibility, perhaps even project based work or to test a new role. But obviously, repeated new renewals come with its own risk, and the most significant is that legal exposure. So, if the employer decides not to renew a repeated extended fixed term contract, the employee might argue unfair labor practice and even wrongful termination, especially where they develop a legitimate expectation of continued employment. The NIC could look beyond the contract and at the overall pattern of employment. Such cases might obviously be costly, time consuming, and even have a damage to the employer's reputation, especially where you have to go to court at every given time on certain contracts of that nature. The There might even be that administrative burden where you're constantly managing renewals year on year. That in itself can also be something. So, how can would the employer and the employee navigate this? For the employer, one, justify the use of the FTC. Avoid abuses of FTC. Use it only when it is genuinely necessary for specific projects, seasonal work, or on temporary roles where you are trying to test out the role, as we said. Ensure that there's clarity of that term. Let it be very clear. Let it be clear that it's for a fixed nature and there is a non-guarantee of renewal. Then avoid excessive renewals. I think that's the most important part, really, where you are renewing for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, then obviously it becomes a joke. The employee would obviously be expecting that you're going to renew the next year, especially when he's doing core activities in the company. Then, more importantly, seek advice of legal counsel when you want to embark on using FTCs. For employees, I think it's important that one, you read your contract carefully. I've had situations where clients come to me and they've not read that contract. Is until the lawyer looks at it and even simple aspects of the contract, terms of the contract are not read and they didn't understand even the implication of this. So read your contract carefully, understand the terms, especially the end dates, if there are any renewal clauses or if there are no renewal clauses, so you know what to do. um, Documents, keep your documents, keep record of all your documents, all your renewals, because in FTCs, obviously, that means every year you will get a new document saying that your contract has been renewed. Keep the renewal, because even in those renewals, you might have hidden terms or new terms that have been introduced that you're not aware of. And of course, seek legal counsel, because as we said, if there are hidden clauses, renewals, terms you do not understand, that is where the lawyer comes in. I don't think that you should you should shy away from using a lawyer, even if you think you might need to pay, because you might even pay dearly if you avoid using a lawyer. Well, by and large, fixed term contracts are a valuable to employment, especially for the employers, because what it does is it gives you, as we've said, the aspect to test a role, to do new things, to keep certain things simple. Instead of keep people that are permanent and having issues, you can decide and say you're going to yank someone off if they are not as effective as you thought that they were, or maybe a role is an overkill in to the company's objectives. You can decide. By and large, fixed term contracts, it must be a term that must be used correctly. It can't be one that can be used to avoid regulation or laws or those sort of things. So understanding the nuances, especially around repeated renewals, is essential to foster a fair employment practice and avoid potential pitfalls eventually. My name is Mubarak Ebemi. Thank you for listening.